Based on this story, we will learn about Perspecticide. It is a psychological term for the incapacity to know what you know, the murder of your perspective. It happens when a manipulator doesn't just lie to you, but actively overwrites your reality until you are essentially a ghost in your own life. You don't trust your eyes, you don't trust your memory, you only trust him. In this case, the weapon wasn't a fist or a shout. It was a plastic stick with 2 pink lines and a husband who loved me enough to convince me I was crazy. But he forgot one thing. Even a broken mind can spot a pattern if it stares at it long enough. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The library always smelled of vanilla and decaying paper, a comforting scent usually. But today, the air felt thick, almost suffocating. I was looking for the first edition of The Great Gatsby for a client, a man who had too much money and zero taste. I knew exactly where it was supposed to be. 3rd shelf, eye level. My system was flawless. It had to be. If I couldn't trust my filing system, what could I trust? I pulled the spine. It felt lighter than it should have. It wasn't the book. It was a hollowed-out safe box disguised as a vintage classic. I didn't own this. I'd never bought it. I opened it. Inside, resting on the velvet lining like a perverse jewel, was a plastic stick. A pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. My stomach did a slow, sick roll. I wasn't pregnant. We hadn't been intimate in 3 months? Maybe 4. The silence in the room suddenly felt loud, buzzing against my ears. I picked it up. It was warm. Someone had placed it here recently. If this wasn't mine, and it was in my house, then who was the 3rd person in my marriage? So I didn't scream. I didn't throw it. I sat it on the marble island in the kitchen and waited. When Julian walked in, he looked impeccable. Charcoal suit, tie loosened just enough to suggest hard work, but not disarray. He smiled when he saw me, that easy, confident tilt of the lips that used to make my knees weak. "Hey," he said, dropping his keys in the bowl. Clatter. "You look intense. Everything okay?" I pointed at the stick. "Found this in the library, in a fake book." He looked at it, then at me. No panic. No widening of the eyes, just a slight furrow of the brow, like he was trying to solve a mild puzzle. "Is that?" he trailed off. "Natalie, is that yours?" "Don't insult me, Julian." He walked over, picked it up, and turned it over in his hands. I don't understand. Why would you hide this?" He looked up, his eyes soft, filled with a terrifying amount of pity. "Honey, did you buy this and forget, like the dry cleaning last week?" My breath hitched. I didn't forget the dry cleaning. "You said you picked it up." "I did," he said gently, stepping closer. "After you called me in a panic because you couldn't find the ticket, remember?" I didn't remember that. I stared at him. Was he lying? Or was I losing it? Sex 1.5 cents. I waited until he was in the shower. I needed data. Facts don't have memory lapses. I logged into our joint bank account, my fingers trembling slightly on the keyboard. I scanned the last 30 days, Whole Foods, Shell Station, Starbucks. And then, there it was, 3 days ago, Walgreens, 4th Avenue, $24.90. I stared at the screen. I had been on 4th Avenue 3 days ago. I had gone to the post office. Did I stop? I tried to replay the afternoon, but it was a blur of gray rain and traffic. I remembered the post office. I remembered getting coffee. But the pharmacy? What are you doing? I jumped. Julian was standing in the doorway, towel around his waist, damp hair falling over his forehead. He wasn't angry. He looked worried. "Just checking the budget," I lied. "Okay," he said slowly. "Don't stay up too late. You know how you get when you're tired. You start seeing things that aren't there." He walked away. I looked back at the screen. If I bought it, why did I hide it? And why couldn't I remember taking it? The restaurant was loud. Too loud. The clock's back to the no trick at the grope, the clear being mined. The clinking of silverware felt like needles. We were dining with the board members of the Seattle Arts Council. This was my world. I needed to be sharp. Natalie has been doing incredible work with the restoration of the 17th century pieces, Julian said, his hand resting possessively on the back of my neck. His fingers were warm, heavy. It's a delicate process, I said, taking a sip of wine. Chemical balance is key. Much like marriage, the board chairman joked. Everyone laughed. Well, Julian said, his voice dropping an octave, intimate but loud enough for the table to hear. We're working on our own balance. Natalie's been under a lot of stress lately. We're taking things day by day, right, darling? He squeezed my neck. Just a little. It wasn't a caress. It was a warning. The table went quiet. They looked at me, not with respect, but with concern. He had just painted me as the fragile, unstable wife without saying a single negative word. I'm fine, Julian, I said, my voice sharp. Of course you are, he soothed, patting me. I'm just saying, we're supporting you. Support. It felt a lot like a cage. Why was he isolating me in public? The next morning, I went to the gallery early. I needed to be in my own space, surrounded by solvents and canvases. The smell of turpentine was usually grounding, but today it made me nauseous. Chloe, Julian's executive assistant, walked in. She was 24, bright-eyed, efficient. Too efficient. Good morning, Natalie, she chirped, placing a stack of mail on my desk. Julian asked me to bring these to you. He said you might have trouble sorting them. I can sort mail, Chloe, I snapped. Oh, I know. He said to help. She leaned over to adjust a stack of papers. That's when it hit me. A scent. Vanilla and jasmine. Subtle, expensive. It wasn't my perfume, but it was the exact scent that had been clinging to Julian's trench coat last Tuesday. I had assumed he'd hugged a client. I looked at her stomach, flat, but she was wearing a loose blouse, untucked. Chloe, I asked, keeping my voice neutral, have you been to the library at my house recently? Your house? She blinked. No, why would I be there? Her pulse was visible in her neck, a tiny, rapid flutter. She was lying. Sex, 1.5. I needed to know if I was crazy or if I getting played, so I set a trap. When I got home, I went back to the library. The hollow book was still on the shelf. I took the pregnancy test out and moved it. I placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk, under a stack of invoices. If Julian was innocent, the test would stay there. If he was gaslighting me, if he needed me to find it again to reinforce my confusion, it would move. So, yeah, I'm going to head to the gym, Julian called out from the hallway an hour later. Don't wait up. Have fun, I called back. I waited 20 minutes after he left. Then I went to the library. I pulled the hollow book. Empty. Good. I went to my desk. I opened the drawer. The test was gone. My heart hammered against my ribs. I ran back to the library. I pulled the book again. There it was, inside the hollow space. He hadn't gone to the gym. He had come back inside, quiet as a ghost, and moved it back. He wanted me to think I hadn't moved it. He wanted me to doubt my own actions from an hour ago. This wasn't an affair. This was psychological warfare. Shit meta, 1.5. Was trying to make me incompetent. There had to be a reason. Love doesn't require a power of attorney. Money does. I stayed up until 3 a.m., digging through the gallery's digital archives. I bypassed the main accounting software, Julian controlled that, and went straight to the raw restoration logs. Every painting we restored had a billable hour sheet attached. I found a pattern. The Verrocchio landscape. We had billed 400 hours for restoration. I remembered that piece. It needed a light cleaning, 10 hours max. Where did the money for the other 390 hours go? I followed the transaction ID. It didn't go to our main account. It went to Archival Solutions, LLC. I searched the LLC. Registered in Delaware. Anonymous agent. You're stealing from me, I whispered to the empty room. But stealing wasn't enough. If I caught him, he'd go to jail. Unless I wasn't credible. Unless I was the confused wife who hallucinated numbers, just like she hallucinated pregnancy tests. Meta. Sex, 1.5. I need to update my will, Arthur. Arthur had been my father's lawyer for 30 years. He sat behind his mahogany desk, looking uncomfortable. He kept shifting his weight, avoiding eye contact. "Natalie, are you sure this is the right time?" he asked, cleaning his glasses nervously. "What do you mean, the right time?" "Well," he hesitated. "Julian called me. He mentioned you were having some cognitive episodes. He was concerned about you making legal decisions while under duress." My blood ran cold. "He called you?" "He asked about the protocols for power of attorney, strictly protective, of course, in case your condition worsens." "I don't have a condition, Arthur. I have a husband who is embezzling from my company." Arthur sighed, putting his glasses back on. He looked at me with that same pity I saw at the dinner party. "Paranoia is a symptom, Natalie. Julian mentioned you might say something like that. He had immunized the lawyer against the truth. Anything I said now was just proof of my illness." Sex 1.5. Home. Not yet. I drove to the country club where Julian played golf. I knew he kept his clubs in locker 402. I had the spare key. I'd made it years ago when he lost his. The locker room was empty. I opened 402. His bag was there. I unzipped the side pocket where he kept his gloves. Deep inside, wrapped in a towel, was a phone. Not his iPhone, an old Android. I pressed the power button. Locked. But the background image lit up. It wasn't me. It wasn't a landscape. It was a little boy, maybe 3 years old. He had Julian's eyes, the exact shape, the exact color. I stared at the screen until it went black. He didn't just have a girlfriend. He had a family. A whole other life that had been running parallel to mine for years. And this new pregnancy? It wasn't the first. Who pays for a secret family in Seattle? A wife with a trust fund and dementia. Sex 1.5. I sat in my car in the parking lot. The burner phone reflected in the languor that the contributors were stating. Another wife was a break rate bad, and sex. I thought about the pharmacy charge, the one on my statement. Walgreens, 4th Avenue. I pulled up my banking app again. I clicked on the transaction details. I needed to see the timestamp. 2:14 p.m. I checked my own calendar for 3 days ago. At 2:14 p.m., I was on a Zoom call with a client in London. I had the recording saved on my laptop. I was on camera. I wasn't at Walgreens. Then how? I looked at the card number on the transaction. It ended in 4498. That was my card. I opened my wallet. My card ended in 4498. I pulled it out. I flipped it over. The signature strip was blank. I had signed my card years ago. This was a duplicate. He had ordered a replacement card on my account, intercepted the mail, used it to buy the test, and then swapped it into my wallet while I slept. He planted the digital evidence and the physical evidence. It was brilliant. It was evil. And it meant he wasn't just trying to leave me. He was trying to erase me. Shaq Meta. I didn't go home. I followed him. Tracking Julian was disturbingly easy. For a man so meticulous about covering his digital tracks, he was arrogant about his physical ones. He drove his silver Porsche, the one I paid the lease on, straight to Queen Anne. It was a neighborhood of family homes, strollers, and expensive dogs. Not the place for a sordid affair. It was the place for a life. He pulled into the driveway of a charming craftsman bungalow. It had blue hydrangeas in the front yard. I hate hydrangeas. They require too much water. I parked 3 houses down, killing the engine. The rain drummed against the roof, a relentless, rhythmic tapping. I watched him get out. He didn't knock. He used a key. He walked in like he owned the place. And judging by the way the porch light flicked on a second later, he probably did. With my money. Why does a man need 2 houses in the same city? Because one holds his obligations, and the other holds his dreams. I realized then I wasn't the wife. I was the investor. I crept closer, hiding behind the bulk of a parked SUV. The curtains were drawn, but they were sheer. I could see silhouettes moving against the warm yellow light inside. Julian took off his coat. Then another figure approached him. A woman. It was Chloe. She turned in profile and the breath snagged in my throat. She wasn't just showing. She was heavily pregnant. 7 months at least. Julian placed his hand on her stomach. He leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a sexual kiss. It was tender. It was the kiss of a man greeting his family. The look on his face, even in silhouette, was open, relaxed, a look he hadn't given me in 5 years. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The pregnancy test I found wasn't a mistake. It was a souvenir, a memento he kept, maybe to remind himself of the day his real life began. He wasn't leaving me for her. He was waiting until he had stripped me of everything so he could afford her. So I wanted to storm in there. I wanted to smash the windows and scream. But that's what the unstable Natalie would do. That's what the Natalie with dementia would do. So I drove home. I walked into the house, the silence pressing against my ears. I went straight to his home office. Locked, of course. But Julian was a creature of habit. He hid the key to his desk in the battery compartment of the vintage clock on the mantel. I popped the back off. There it was. I opened the bottom drawer of his mahogany desk. Underneath a stack of Art Forum magazines, I found a manila folder. No label. Inside were the drafts: power of attorney, guardianship petition, and a brochure for Serenity Hills Memory Care Facility. I scanned the dates. The petition was dated for tomorrow. He was filing in the morning. He wasn't just going to take my money. He was going to lock me away to do it. Sex more than the affair. Adultery gets you a divorce. Fraud gets you leverage. I went back to the computer, back to the Archival Solutions LLC data. I cross-referenced the payments with our inventory. The Verrocchio wasn't the only anomaly. There were 5 others, all restored by this shell company. I pulled the physical files for those paintings. They were all mid-tier works, purchased by the gallery recently. Then I saw the appraisals. They were signed by a man named Marcus Thorne. I looked him up. He didn't exist. Julian wasn't restoring paintings. He was forging provenance. He was buying worthless copies, creating fake restoration histories to authenticate them as lost masters, and selling them through my gallery. If this came out, the gallery would be ruined. My legacy would be ash. But if he went down for it alone, if I was the whistleblower, I looked at the clock. 4 a.m. I had 4 hours before the courts opened. I heard his key in the door at 6:30 a.m. I was sitting on the kitchen floor, wearing my pajamas, rocking back and forth slightly. I had scattered a few photo albums around me. "Natalie?" Julian froze in the doorway. What are you doing?" I looked up at him, making sure my eyes were wide, vacant. I was looking for my mother, Julian. Have you seen her?" My mother had been dead for 10 years. Julian's face went through a complicated series of gymnastics: shock, then calculation, then, finally, a terrifying satisfaction. "Oh, honey," he said, his voice dripping with that weaponized concern. "Come here. Let me help you up." I let him lift me. I leaned my weight against him. "I feel so confused," I whispered. "I don't know what's happening to me." "It's okay," he soothed, stroking my hair. "I'm going to take care of everything. I have an appointment with Arthur today. We're going to make sure you're safe." "Okay," I said, burying my face in his chest to hide my smile. "You always know what to do." He thought I was broken. He thought he had won. "Sec, I'm going to take a shower," he said, checking his watch. "I have a big day." "Okay," I said. As soon as the water started running, I grabbed his jacket. I slipped a small black drive, a voice-activated recorder I used for client meetings, into the lining of his inner pocket. It was slim, undetectable unless you were looking for it. He came downstairs 10 minutes later, smelling of soap and victory. "Rest today, darling," he said, kissing my forehead. "I'll handle the auction tonight. You shouldn't strain yourself." "Maybe you're right," I said. "I'll just stay here." He left. I waited 5 minutes. Then I got dressed. not in pajamas, in my black Yves Saint Laurent suit, the one that made me look like a shark in silk. I didn't stay home. I went to the FBI field office. Sex, 1.5. The gala was in full swing when I arrived. The gallery was in 330 minutes and 24% catching small comp of diamond necklaces. Julian was at the podium holding court. He looked magnificent, the grieving husband, soldiering on while his wife deteriorated at home. And now, Julian announced, his voice booming, the highlight of our evening, the rediscovered Verrocchio. The curtain dropped. The painting was unveiled. The crowd gasped. I walked through the double doors at the back of the room. The click of my heels on the hardwood was sharp, deliberate. Heads turned. The whisper started low and spread like a wave. Julian froze. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered. "Natalie," he called out, stepping down from the stage. I didn't expect you. Are you feeling up to this?" He was trying to frame the narrative. Look at the poor, confused woman wandering in. I walked straight past him. I didn't look at him. I walked to the microphone. "I'm feeling much better, Julian," I said into the mic. My voice was steady, cold, clarified, actually. #meta. "So, yeah, sorry to interrupt," I said to the room. I saw the confusion on the faces of the donors. "But I think there's been a mistake." I gestured to the painting. "This piece," I said, pointing a manicured finger at the canvas, "is a remarkable work. But it isn't a Verrocchio. It's a student copy from the 19th century, and the restoration logs verifying it, they were fabricated by a shell company owned by my husband." The silence was absolute. You could hear the hum of the HVAC system. Julian lunged forward. "Natalie, stop. She's not well." "Please, everyone. My wife is I'm suffering from a husband who thinks he's smarter than he is," I cut in. I pulled a stack of papers from my clutch. "These are the bank transfers. These are the fake appraisals. And this," I held up a flash drive, "is a recording of Julian explaining the scheme to his mistress this morning." I hadn't listened to the bug yet. I didn't need to. I knew he was arrogant enough to brag. Julian stopped. He looked at the papers. He looked at me. And for the first time, the mask slipped. I saw the hatred. Pure, unadulterated hatred. The doors opened again, but it wasn't a late guest. 4 officers walked in. They weren't wearing uniforms. They were in suits. Economic Crimes Unit. They didn't come to me. They went to Julian. "Julian Thorne?" the lead agent asked. "This is ridiculous," Julian spat, straightening his tie. "My wife is having a psychotic break. You need to remove her." "We've reviewed the digital evidence Mrs. Thorne provided this afternoon," the agent said. "Turn around, please." The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the room. Julian didn't struggle. He didn't beg. He just stared at me. His eyes were cold, dead sharks. "You'll destroy the gallery," he hissed as they walked him past me. "You're burning your own house down." "It's insured," I whispered. I visited him 3 days later. The glass partition was thick, smudged with fingerprints. He was wearing orange. It clashed with his skin tone. He sat down, picking up the phone. He didn't look defeated. He looked annoyed, like this was a scheduling conflict. "You know," he said, his voice tinny through the receiver, "you were sloppy. The recording was inadmissible. You got lucky." "I made my own luck," I said. "You can't run the business without me," he sneered. "You're a technician, Natalie. You're not a visionary. You'll be bankrupt in a year." "Maybe," I said, "but I'll be free." "And the baby?" he asked. A low blow. "Chloe's having a boy. My son." "Chloe is cooperating with the prosecution in exchange for immunity," I said calmly. "She gave them the laptop, Julian, the one with the passwords." His eye twitched, just once. "So, yeah," I stood up. "I just came to say goodbye, and to tell you, I kept the pregnancy test." "Why?" he asked, genuinely confused. "To remind me," I said, placing my hand on the glass, "that when things look positive, sometimes it just means you're being screwed." I hung up the phone. I didn't look back. Lesson learned. Based on this story, we have learned about the competent villain paradox. We are taught that villains make mistakes because they are evil. But true sociopaths don't fail because they are bad. They fail because they underestimate the intelligence of their victims. Julian's mistake wasn't the fraud or the affair. It was his assumption that my love for him made me blind. He weaponized my health. He weaponized my trust. But he forgot that a woman who restores art for a living spends her entire life looking for cracks in the varnish. Lesson: when someone tells you that you are crazy, stop listening to their words and start looking at their math. The numbers never lie. Only the people counting them do. Sex. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.